He was born in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. Grew up in Muncie, Pennsylvania. Joined the United States Marine Corps, age 17. 7.5 years in the Marines. He was a guard in North Carolina prison system. He was a police officer in Jacksonville, North Carolina. He became a West Hartford police officer 10 years ago. And his name is Officer Jeffrey Swank. Jeff, welcome to Journeys with Jeff.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Nice to have you with us. That's quite a road already there with the 17 years old, United States Marine Corps.
Yes, sir.
How did that happen?
Well, unfortunately, I probably wasn't one of the greatest kids in the world. Got myself into some minor trouble, but I lived in a town of probably between 2,500 and 3,000 people, 2 stoplights, so not a lot to do. So unfortunately, I was rambunctious and kind of got out and hanging out with sometimes with kids I probably shouldn't have been hanging out with, but there wasn't nothing going, and I really wasn't into school that much. School wasn't very pleasing to me, so I started looking into the Marine Corps. And I had a cousin that had joined up in the Marine Corps, so that kind of maybe is what led me more towards the Marine Corps at first. But obviously then after talking to the recruiters, I just felt they had the best camaraderie and esprit de corps. And
what do you suppose made you so, is the word you use, rambunctious? What was there something that was, that some event or something in your life that kind of got you a little rambunctious or angry or something, or confused or whatever?
No, I don't think it was any one thing. I think I did have a couple older brothers. They were even more rambunctious than me and my younger brother. So I think maybe that had something to do with it a little bit. Not to say that it's their fault, because I was an individual and I could make my own decisions even as a teenager. And but that probably had a lot to do with it. But again, you know, it's my own choice to make the decisions I made. So,
but it's interesting. We have a rambunctious kid, but you went down. Your life's work has been with police officer, prison guard, Marine Corps.
Yeah. The complete opposite.
It's kind of like, it would appear that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's your theory on that?
Well, the Marine Corps obviously was a decision because I felt like I didn't have a path to take per se. So I think that was a way to kind of establish something to where I could get some type of career path. I initially went in the reserves in the Marine Corps, and I can remember specifically sitting down at the table with the recruiter and my mother, and the recruiter saying, or telling my mom about it, the reserves and everything, and my mom literally looked at me and said, I don't think the reserves are going to give you the discipline you need. And I said, well, Mom, they go to the same boot camp as regular Marines. The Marines are Marines. They all go to boot camp together, And then that kind of allowed her to say yes to the reserves. And then I did schooling and everything, boot camp and schooling, and came home and was working a job that probably would have had me laid off every winter, standing in a building, smelling paint fumes and all this other stuff. And I just was like, I got to do something. This can't be what my life has in store for me. And so I signed up active duty, and that was the beginning of that.
On some other level there, you almost intuitively knew what you had to do and what was best for you to try to get yourself to lead a productive life and the life that was be more satisfying to you. Is that Mommy?
No, this is actually my grandmother. And
okay, we can zoom in on that.
I'm guessing around a year old or newborn.
That's Grandma.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yep.
Jeff.
Yep.
Okay, very good. And we've got this
gentleman is my dad, my father. So
Okay.
I didn't live with him. I probably saw him about 10 times growing up because he lived in Kansas.
What happened what happened that separated you?
I don't know why he ended up in Fredonia, Kansas. I just know that I was about 4 years old when my mom and my father divorced, and then for whatever reason he left the state and went out to Kansas. But I don't know the ins and outs as to why he left the state, anyways. I mean, I know somewhat about the divorce and those things, but
Yeah.
you know,
So, well, there was your mother met a gentleman after when you were still a young boy.
Yes.
When you say he was, do you have that picture? Or do we have
I think we have to get that later.
Okay, we could edit that in later.
Yeah.
But he was like your stepdad, or
Yes.
but did you
I
look
consider
upon
him
as
to
your
be my
father?
dad. Yes. Yeah, because I look at it this way: my two children, I've raised them since they were 6 and 7, and they're my boys. I wouldn't have it any other way. People ask me, "Do you have children?" I say yes. I don't say stepchildren or, I don't say step grandchildren. They're my kids. I raised them, and I feel that way about my dad. He raised me. He was detrimental into the person I am today, and he drove tractor trailer all his life, and that's all I ever wanted to do, which is what I did when I joined the Marine Corps. I drove trucks when I was in the Marine Corps, and wanted to do that when I got out, but then the tides changed, and I got influenced by my younger brother, who was a law enforcement in the military in the Marine Corps, and that led me into having a desire to become law enforcement.
And where's your younger brother today?
He lives in Connecticut. He's a West Hartford police officer as well.
So you and your brother are both West Hartford police officers.
Yes.
And how has that been? What would you say is in terms of being a police officer? What is for you? What is the most rewarding thing about the greatest satisfaction or the greatest reward that you get from being a police officer?
Well, it might. Some people probably will say this sounds cliche, but we all want to get bad guys off the street, robbers and bank robbers, and people committing violent crimes and stuff. But just to simply help people, like when you go in, whether it's an elderly person who's getting scammed out of their money, or whether it's parents having difficulties with their kids and sitting down and talking with their kids, or going into a school where a child's having difficulties and kind of acting out in school, or just starting a case from the beginning to the end. And sometimes that can be frustrating, but to know that this person was hurting or had a problem, and you found out who stole their jewelry from their house or whatever, or their checks, or and then finally getting to the end where you actually can get a warrant approved and actually go serve it and have that person arrested, and know that you started with this person and you completed the case, and you're able to give them some closure, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
So.
Wow, very good. Yeah. And you also, I don't want to leave out your activities with your church. You belong to a church.
Yes.
What church is that?
It's Valley Community Baptist Church in Avon.
Okay, Valley Community
Baptist Church.
And you said there's some things you're involved in with you've been to Haiti, you've been to Africa.
Yes.
What is that all about?
I've been to Haiti. This will be my 8th year this year, if I'm able to go.
Every year you go to Haiti for?
Every year in the summer. I go with my church, but we go with an organization called Kids Alive International, and they basically house orphaned children or children's in need. A lot of them are in Haiti. A lot of them are from the big earthquake that happened, I think in 2010 it was. So we go down there. When we first went down there, we were helping build houses. The last 4 years, we've actually helped build septic systems for the houses, because the way they were being built down there, they weren't quite to a standard where it wouldn't leak up, because they didn't have all the information that they needed in the resources to make them safe, where stuff was bubbling up out of the ground and kids were running around and playing. And so we thought, we can always put down sidewalks and stuff, but this is something that's a real safety hazard and a need. So the last 3 or 4 years we've been doing septic systems and providing safety in that area.
And what about Africa? Where do you go in Africa? What city?
In Africa, my wife had been twice, and she really felt that I would enjoy going, so we prayed about it, and the means and the funds and everything came about, and the safety, because it was in Cameroon, Africa, which is on the western part of the state, which is kind of in an uproar right now. And but when we went over there, we actually taught kids. So the first 3 or 4 days we were there, we actually did like vacation Bible school stuff with children of missionaries, because the missionaries were having their conference. And then in the second week, we actually went into a high school, and we taught boys and girls about integrity and how to be a child of integrity and a child of growing up and doing that through learning about God.
So, what has been your overreaching the prison guard and the police officer, and working in Haiti and Africa and the church groups and so on? What's the overarching commonality that you values that you've brought to your life?
Certainly with teaching all the children and everything, and my own grandchildren and my children growing up. When I met my wife, I wasn't a Christian. I have 100% faith in my faith in God and Jesus Christ. But number one, I think if you treat others how you want to be treated, and sometimes as human beings, that's not easy to do. We all fall short. So there are times that I've yelled at people or get upset with my wife or get upset with my grandchildren. But then I also know that I can go back and I can tell them I'm sorry, and not only say I'm sorry, but ask for forgiveness, right? So they know that I'm not just saying sorry because I'm saying I'm sorry. Like, I want to know that you forgive me because I'm telling you I did something wrong. So, integrity, trust, faith.
If you look back over your life, Jeff, from day one till now, and is it possible, is there one or two people that you would say that you would credit for having the biggest influence in your life?
Wow. Well, my mom recently accepted. I don't want to get emotional, but
okay,
my mom recently
all right.
accepted Jesus Christ as her Lord and Savior. And if I ever seen God work in a person's life, that would be her. Because my mom had a lot of struggles, as we've talked about before, raising 5 children, even with my dad. It was just a real struggle. Sometimes she worked 2 and 3 jobs at a time. And
where's that picture with you and your? We can get that later. I want it with your mother and you and your.
yeah,
sibling.
it's out there.
Okay,
Yeah.
we'll get it. We'll
Yeah.
have that edited in
Yeah.
for the folks will be able to see that. I'm sorry. Keep going.
Yep.
So your mother.
Yeah, my mom, again, my dad, but also my wife was a big influence in my life when I met her, because I wasn't a Christian, and not that I was pretty steady in the Marine Corps. I mean, I was single, I didn't have any debt, I didn't go out and party or any of that stuff, which was easy to do. But there was a gentleman named Donnie Warner who was with the community services organization in my town, and some of the times I got in trouble, he was there for me, and I actually just got to see him not long ago, and that was a blessing, actually, because I hadn't seen him in probably 20 years, and I actually got to see him. I was back home. But again, I have an aunt and uncle that I grew up with, lived in town. I have several aunts and uncles, but that grew up in town, that were always there, support us. I go stay at their house when I go home now. That's where I stay. And examples both ways, like my older brothers, I love them to death. My mom especially, she's taught me that no matter what, through perseverance, you can get through anything.
Where's your mother now?
She lives in Muncie, Pennsylvania.
And you said she was just here to visit.
Yep, we just took her back the other day, and she's actually coming back up at the end of next week. And she's going to stay for another 3 or 4 weeks to help out with my grandkids.
And you really love her crazy,
yeah,
huh?
Yeah, she's next to my wife. She's my world. My wife and my children and my grandchildren.
Wow. Well, what Jeff? You probably already pretty much touched on it, but what's your most important belief?
Yeah, that would be my faith in Jesus Christ, 100%. And again, sometimes some of my coworkers might tell you that sometimes when things happen, I get a little upset, and but the bottom line is I have no doubt that I'm sound in where I'm going, and that no matter what happens in my life, that things are always, he's always with me, number one, and things are always going to be, his will is going to be done, and I can't beat it. It's nothing better. I have peace. So.
Well, I was going to say that must be a great feeling of consolation.
Yes.
And peace that you feel. What about as you've lived your life and done your life's work up to this point, and you look around today, this day and age, at the world, the United States in specific, what is there anything that concerns you, that gives you pause for worry or concern?
Yeah. I hate it, but I almost want to say everything. But I'll say mainly that again, I'm strong in my faith, so I would say mainly that this country's turning away from God. When I was in Africa, the gentleman that we were there with, Tom and Ellen Shotanis, Tom told me, he says, I always tell the folks here, I'm like, listen, if you just live as Jesus lived, to love your neighbor and to love each other and to love your parents, and thou shalt not kill, and right? How can the world be anything but good? And this world, it's all about me anymore. It's all about, it's not about sharing, and it's not about this person's down in their luck, let's help them up. It's walk right past them. And it's crazy to me. And I do youth group at the church, and it's even teaching the young kids today, I mean, a lot of folks that we have in youth group and stuff, their parents have money and stuff. So when they come over to the north end of Hartford and they do Hartford City missions for Saturday to Wednesday and have to live on the funds of basically like they're living on food stamps, they come into the north end of Hartford thinking, I'm terrified, I'm probably going to get murdered. Literally, that's their thought, And there's been events that have happened around my house, and I tell people, they're not looking to hurt me or that's a bad person going after a bad person because they're against each other. It's not like somebody's just running around just hurting innocent people for the most part.
Well, I think it's interesting for the viewers.
Sorry.
Though the viewers, you live on Capon Street in Hartford, in the north end of Hartford.
Yes.
And you feel perfectly comfortable and perfectly at home, and
yes,
your neighbors your neighbors are fine, you value them.
Yes.
They seem to be good for the most part.
Yes.
Like wherever you go, it seems like most people are going to be law-abiding, caring.
Yes. And when I first moved into the north end of Hartford, I had some people kind of up in arms, if you would say, about my decision. But I tell them, like my brother told me when we talked about it, that 95% of the people in any city or town are good people. Right? There's 5% bad people. Unfortunately, there's in the 5% in the north end of Hartford, we're in the city of Hartford, are doing a little bit worse bad things. And that happens, unfortunately.
Why do you suppose that is, Jeff?
I think some of it's societal. I think some of it's economical, like the fact that less funding, less services, things of that nature.
Do you think that going back to your religious orientation, and specifically the moral and ethical principles that you subscribe to as Jesus Christ
Yes.
taught in his life,
Yes.
do you think that if more people at all levels of society were a little bit more inclined to live by those principles, live by sharing and loving and compassion, do you think a lot of these societal problems might be alleviated to a certain extent?
To a certain extent. I mean, you're always going to have people that, well, I mean, I think if everybody chose to live that way, I think 100%, I think it would solve the problem. You know, but unfortunately in this world, whether it's the media, the news, I mean, the news does nothing but play negative stuff. You watch 30 minutes of news and there might be 5-minute segment of good stuff. Everything else is negative, you know, about all the bad things that happen. But if people, you know, if they weren't barraged with all the negative of this world, you know, it's always, again, it's about me, or take, or want, about having more stuff, right? If we were all willing to share, you know, then everybody would have things and people wouldn't want to take things from other people or rob, you know. It's an all-around problem. It's not any one group of people. It's not any one society. It's not any one country.
It sounds like you're saying it's a human problem.
Sure, I agree with that 100%.
And all for all of us,
Yes.
all inhabitants of
Sure.
this world.
Right.
All humans.
Yeah, it's no different than, you know, people seeing someone of the Islamic faith and saying that they're a bad person because of things that have happened from extremists. You know, I'm very good friends with several Islamic people from Jordan, different countries, and, you know, why would I want to say they're bad just because they're Islamic? Islamic teaches peace, you know, but, you know, it's a human problem.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I take it. Let me ask you this: has there been anything that you've read, if you could tell the viewers to get a book, one specific book that you've read that's made an impression on you, is there a book that you've read that you think might?
Yeah, you asked me a question, now I'm not going to be able to think of the name. It actually just became a movie recently, and it was a very short book. I'm not a big book reader. I don't know if I'm going to be able to think about it, but it is basically a book and a movie about forgiveness and about dealing with issues with your father and you know, or this particular person dealt with.
Yeah, I on the tip of my tongue too.
Yeah. The Shack is the name of the book.
I've heard about that. Yeah.
Very short, thin book, and it of course a lot of it's based on my faith, you know, but it portrays Jesus Christ in many different senses as a woman, as a man, because there's times in our lives where we need different things. Like in this particular situation, the guy had issues with his father, so initially Jesus was presented as a female. And then at one point when he needed to confront issues with his father, Jesus was portrayed as a man. But the ultimate goal is that it's about forgiveness and being able to forgive people and things that have happened in your life. And ultimately, if we can all forgive, how can it not be a better place? If I've done you wrong and I come to you and you're able to forgive me, then we can work through it and we can move on.
Well, the act of forgiving is a very powerful. Now, is forgiving for the sake of the forgiver or for the forgiven?
Forgiver, 100%. And I've told my mom this and people all over. If my mom gets up, let's say me, if I get upset with somebody and I'm mad at them, well, they're going about their business. It's not affecting them any, right? It's affecting me because I keep being mad and angry. But if I forgive them, honestly and truly forgive them, then I let it go. Forgiveness is letting it go. It's not saying that I don't forget what happened. That may take a little bit longer, but forgiveness is, I'm telling you, I forgive you. I'm not mad at you anymore. I'm not hurt anymore, you know. So it's going to help them. They may come to you, may forgive somebody, and that person says, yeah, whatever, I didn't do nothing to you, right? But the fact that I can forgive them allows me to let it go and move on and have some peace in my life. So ultimately, definitely for the forgiver.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what have you learned? We're down to the last few minutes. Could I could go on for hours talking to you about a very fascinating life, and you have such a wonderful way of sharing it and imparting it.
Thank you.
What would you say what have you learned about yourself? I'm
Well,
sure you've taken stock.
yeah,
You've done some insightful
yeah,
thinking.
I was a very shyful kid when I was younger. My mom probably would not say that I was. She'd probably say I was outgoing. My wife would probably say I'm very outgoing now. And when I get to know you, I am. I open up and I'll joke around and goof around. But I probably would get on myself a lot. There was probably a long time, which maybe my mom doesn't even know this, that I probably almost didn't think not only did I think I probably couldn't do anything or sometimes felt like I wasn't good enough or wasn't worth it, which is why I got in trouble all the time or made bad decisions because I wasn't smart enough to do the right thing or whatever. And, through my mom, through my faith, through my wife, through other family members, I've learned that, as most people will tell you, any parent will tell their child, if you put your mind to it, you can do it. If you, I know that I took steps. You got to take steps. You can't just say you're going to do something and not do it. But
You got to the point, though. It seems to me like at some point you got to a place in your head, in your heart, in your being, that you could do it. That your self-esteem.
sure.
You saw yourself as somebody who's maybe not lacking, who's not weak, who's not inferior, but somebody who I can do it.
That actually had intestinal fortitude.
So again, back to what you're saying, like if you put your mind to it, you can do it. But if putting your mind to something does not match up with that underlying self-esteem,
Sure. Yeah.
that's not going to work.
Correct.
But you got to where a point where you began to believe in yourself.
Sure.
You began to see yourself in a more positive, caring, loving way.
Yeah. I'd say it all probably started when I joined the Marine Corps. That probably graduating boot camp was probably the beginning of my life, of what I've done so far.
Yeah.
Because I showed myself that, hey, well, first of all, most Marines would say, hey, if you can do that, you can do anything, right? Semper Fi. So, but, getting through boot camp and showing myself that I can be put through hard times and struggles and get knocked down and get back up again, probably was the beginning. And then, of course, as most married guys would say, having a wife that supports you and backs you and lets you know. My wife's been there for me 100%, even in the bad times. So, and then, of course, my mom, throughout my life, she's been a rock.
So if you have 10 seconds to look in the camera and say something to your mother, to your wife, go ahead.
Mom and Mary, who I call Babe, I just want to thank you for all your support, understanding, caring, forgiveness, most importantly, for all the times that I've fallen short and made mistakes and caused you any pain or suffering. I just want to thank you for everything you've done for me and continue to do. And I love you dearly.
Thanks, Jeff.
You're very
Ladies
welcome.
and gentlemen, there's nothing more to say. That Jeffrey Swank says it all, and it's amazing how whatever religious orientation you are, how somebody can encapsulate and sum up the way Jeff Swank has done it about how to go about interacting with other people and living your life. And that's what I think any great leader, political or religious leader, would have us do. Interact with everybody out of love. Jeff Swank, thanks a lot.
Thank you.